Hello, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Douglas Johnson. I am a certified yoga teacher at the advanced 500-hour level, ordained minister, kirtan artist, amongst other things. And today, I wanted to speak a little bit about some wisdom from the Bhagavad Gita, specifically perform action without attachment to the outcomes of your action. Before I get into that, however, I do want to thank those who make these talks possible. Those are my patrons on Patreon and those of you who make donations through PayPal and Venmo. If you're interested in any of that, please check out the links below. And I'll just mention you can join my Patreon completely for free, and you get all the same content. I'm trying to approach this in the sort of old-time spiritual teaching approach, where this is based just on donations. So if you feel called to or moved to help support this work, then please consider making a donation, either one time or again, you can do so monthly on Patreon. I also want to thank those on YouTube who like, subscribe, comment, and share. That does really help out. Okay, so this is a passage that was drawn to my attention when I was in college back in my 20s. I studied philosophy for many years before I discovered spirituality, if you will. And I was always interested in truth, ultimate truth. And when I was younger, I thought that I could reach the truth through intellectual understanding, through philosophy, through logic. And so I studied philosophy at the university level in high school. So I was in the advanced collegiate level classes for philosophy. My philosophy teacher encouraged me to consider becoming an academic philosopher, actually. He thought that I was so exceptional at it. Then I went on to university. I continued to study philosophy at the university level. And eventually I started studying Eastern philosophy. And that's what introduced me to spirituality, you could say. It wasn't actually the classes that introduced me to spirituality. The classes got me interested in meditation. And when I started meditating, something happened. I had a true spiritual awakening. Despite my skepticism and despite my resistance to such things, I had this experience. But that's something for another time, a story I can share another time. Anyway, my point is that I studied philosophy at the collegiate level, and I have a degree in philosophy. And in those Eastern philosophy classes, one of the texts that I was introduced to that I really fell in love with, that really impacted me deeply, was the Bhagavad Gita. And this one passage in particular really struck a chord, which was perform action without attachment to the outcomes of the action. Now, why is this so important? Why is this so wise? Because the truth of the matter is we can't control outcomes. The universe, the world, is just immensely complex. So even though I might want to, I don't know, be famous or have a successful company or have the most beautiful physique ever, whatever it might be, the outcome that I want, the truth of the matter is there's a lot of things that are not under my control. And so when I'm trying to control for outcomes, it's kind of a recipe for suffering, because I think what we'll find is very often we are trying to make one thing happen and it seems like something else happens. And I think anyone who's had success in a field has experienced this. I don't think anyone gets to success by slam dunk after slam dunk after slam dunk. I think anyone who has success has had probably a lot more failures than successes. And what they've done is they've learned from their failures and they've adjusted their actions. So the Bhagavad Gita says, perform action without attachment to the outcome of action. Perform action as a sacrifice to, you could say, the divine. And specifically in the Gita, they're talking about your duty. For modern people like us, we don't have a caste that we're born into. We aren't given a specific duty at birth or because we're in a certain family. At least most of us don't have that. So this might be whatever it is that is presenting in your life that you feel called to do, you feel is your duty. Performing that without attachment to the outcomes is really what this text is encouraging us to do. And as I've already said, we can't control outcomes, but we can control actions. So there are certain actions that we can do that make certain outcomes a lot more likely to happen. And as I said earlier, if you're doing anything that is off the beaten path, anything creative, anything that is just taking you away from what is known, then again, you are probably going to encounter much more failure than success. And so the key is, if you can perform action without attachment to those outcomes, then it frees up a lot of mental and emotional energy to adjust and to go back at it. As a yoga teacher, I see this happening all the time in classes. People come to class, and I think because of the way we're educated in the West, we're afraid of failure. We're afraid of the wrong answer. We're afraid of mistakes. So we come to class, and when the teacher encourages us to do something that we don't think we'll be able to do perfectly, we're scared to even try. And this means that we actually stunt our growth, okay? So I know from experience that if you want to teach the body something new, then usually the body will need to perform that action many, many times before it learns how to do that action gracefully or successfully. So we don't think of eating with a utensil as a particularly difficult or complex action, but it actually is. It's just one that we've performed so often that we don't even think about it. We can perform it without any consideration. So performing a challenging yoga posture that's complex, that requires flexibility, dexterity, strength, balance, there's a lot that goes into that. And especially if we're new, but even if we aren't new to yoga, but we just haven't performed those specific tasks, then we will likely need to perform those tasks over and over and over again before anything in the form of success shows up. Now, I like to mention here that in my classes, I emphasize that success isn't coming from doing the posture. The success comes from the adaptive stresses that we place on the body. So living things adapt to stress. That is Wolff's Law. And so when I do a posture or I do something in yoga that I can't quite yet perform, then what happens is my body begins to make adjustments. My body says, oh, he's trying to do this thing and we can't quite do it yet. So let's make these muscles stronger. Let's make these joints more flexible. Let's work on our balance, whatever it might be, whatever the particular concoction is, to do that successfully, the body begins to adapt. Not when I do the pose properly, but actually when I attempt to do the pose. And this is the key. The benefit doesn't come, you could say, doing the posture is the outcome. And again, this is why performing action without attachment to the outcome is so key, because the only way we get the successful outcome, well, I won't say the only way, but the most likely way we're going to get the outcome that we want is by performing the action again and again and again without attachment. Because again, if I attach to the outcome, what am I going to see? I'm going to see failure. And so I will simply give up. That's what most of us do. If we feel like we're failing at something, if we feel like we're not having success, then we're just going to give up. So this applies in yoga class. It applies in life. I want to share a little story with you that I found very, very interesting as someone who is in the creative field as a musician and a songwriter, kirtan artist. They did a study with a group of pottery students. And they had a class, and they split the class in two. And one half of the class, they said, you will be graded on one piece. So take your time, create your masterpiece, so you have all semester to think about your masterpiece, to plan it out. And at the end of the class, present your piece, and you will be graded on that. And then the other half of the class, they said, you will be graded on output. So we don't care how good the pieces you create are, how poor they are, just create a lot of pieces, all right? And it may have been like a pass-fail, so something like that. But basically, you're going to be graded on output. So they had this whole semester, and at the end of the class, what they did is they had independent judges come in to judge all the pieces. And the outcome is interesting, because we might think that the group that had to produce one masterpiece would be the group with the best pieces, right? Because you're just sitting there and you're thinking about it and you're planning it out and you're trying to create this one masterwork. Whereas the other group, they're too busy just turning out things, right? To think about creating something really great. They're just output, right? Quantity, not quality. What was interesting about the outcome is the group that had the output, the most output, was the group with all the winning pieces. So none of the best pieces came from the group that was supposed to just produce one great work of art. Why is this? Why do you think it is? It's interesting, isn't it? Well, I mean, ultimately, we don't necessarily know. But the theory goes that the group that had to produce one piece, they were just thinking about their one piece, planning it out, trying to make it perfect, but they weren't learning anything because they were, in a sense, afraid to make a mistake. They were just trying to create one perfect thing. So they weren't performing any actions. The other group with the output, they weren't worried about outcomes. They were just trying to produce as much as they possibly could. And as a result, they were learning, they were growing as potters. So by the end of the semester, they were pretty good. And maybe without even intending it or thinking about it, they produced something that was of superior quality to their counterparts who were trying to produce one really, really impactful piece of pottery or art. So this plays into this idea that in life, if we are focused on outcomes, on $1 million, on the love of our life, on being perfect, then we are going to get short-circuited by that, because we generally will not come out of the gate with the skills and the knowledge to be able to produce the outcomes that we want. So much better approach is this approach that we get from the Bhagavad Gita. Forget about the outcomes. Perform action without attachment to the fruits of your actions. Give the fruits to, in the Bhagavad Gita, they would say that Krishna. So you can think of this as spirit or the divine or God or others. If you are a follower of Jesus, you could do this as an offering to Jesus. But this is just a beautiful, beautiful, powerful approach to life that frees us of so much of the mental burden, because so often we're, again, trying to control for outcomes. And of course, we want success. We want to be able to do the yoga pose. We want to have certain outcomes. But this is why it's a practice. It's saying, let that go. Yes, the desire will be there. Yes, you will have a certain outcome in mind as you're performing an action. That's only natural. But that's why this is such a beautiful practice. It's something that you do over and over again. As you find that attachment coming up, as you find yourself getting upset because things didn't go the way that you wanted, you let that go. You recognize what's happening and you give it up to the divine. So I hope you find this useful. I'd love to hear from you if this is a practice that you've ever tried, if you've read the Bhagavad Gita. I'm sharing this with you because this has been something since my 20s, since I read this scripture. This has been something that has stayed with me and that I keep coming back to as a practice in my life. My life anyway, has not gone at all the way that I would have planned or would have liked in terms of my own ideas about reality, about happiness, about the way things should go. But I can honestly say that I am so fulfilled and so happy in this life. And this, I think, is partly due to this teaching and using this teaching. I won't say that that this teaching is always at the forefront of my mind. I explore many texts and many teachings, and I find that certain ones will come to me at certain times and really resonate and guide me through a certain period in my life. But this is one I don't think I've spoken about before, and I definitely wanted to share it with you. Again, we cannot control outcomes. The world is just immensely complex, and it's not like a little petri dish where we can control all the elements going on. So whether we have success or whether we fail is really beyond our control ultimately. It has to do with many more factors than we can ever control. But the one thing we can control is our actions. So perform action without attachment. All right, everyone. Until next time, namaste, and have a beautiful, beautiful day.